Hey, you found the Midwest Motoring Podcast. We're an automotive podcast about just about, well, everything automotive. From news, reactions, reviews, and everything and anything in between. We're kind of like one of those long road trips you take where you get lost and you don't know where you're at, but suddenly you find where you're going and you look back fondly on that journey and go, that was half the fun. So come along and enjoy the ride with us. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Midwest Motoring Podcast. You found us. We're here. We haven't left. We've just been a little bit busy with life and everything else. But my name is Matt Pesiconis. I'm your host. I'm joined in studio today by James Fisher and Jess Myers. Guys, how we doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's Friday. We're recording a little bit late on a Friday. But, you know, that makes it a little bit better because we've also had some whiskeys. We had some old-fashioned... Well, I had an old-fashioned from the Market Bar here in Dublin, Ohio. It was fantastic.
And I had a delicious beer from Seventh Sun Brewing. Please sponsor us.
If any of you want to sponsor, what was it called?
It was called Scientist. It's a delicious IPA.
Okay. You're an IPA guy. I forgot that. Well, I didn't actually forget. I'm just saying that as an acting. Jess, you didn't drink.
I had water.
He had water. It was delicious water.
It was.
Filtered water.
Yes, very refreshing.
Well, on today's episode of the Midwest Motoring Podcast, we're going to be doing a couple different things. We're going to be talking about the top cars, future cars that we're excited for. We're going to talk about a few of them and explain why we think they're worth waiting. You know, you've seen these lists. You know, oh, cars coming out in 2023, what to wait for? And it's like, well, don't wait. Just buy the car you want to buy now. But these are cars I think that are going to be pretty cool, and I can't wait for them to come out and get more information. And then James earlier had a comment that we thought we needed to delve into, and that was, are manuals overrated? That's next on this episode of the Midwest Motoring Podcast. All right, Jess, you were looking up something before the break. You were saying that there's a actual limit to the number of times you can go around a roundabout?
I believe in certain states that is true. I am not having any luck with the internet in the building currently.
Oh, God. I think it
That's
sounds like
always
an excuse.
the excuses with...
Yeah, well, you know.
Well, we don't want to talk about laws because, you know, there's enough of those going around right about now. And plus, everyone knows how to use roundabouts, right? Nobody's questioning how to use a roundabout. And if
Everyone
you are...
is so good at those.
so good. Everyone's so great at the roundabout. But actually, so we want to get into it is like cars that we're excited for here coming up in the next couple of years. So this is a little bit of 2022, a little bit of 2023, but we really wanted to just touch on like cars that we think are going to be exciting. James, you had a couple in there too that aren't even on the list that we've written up on the whiteboard, but I figured we've had some pretty interesting conversations recently about Acura. You know, I was extremely excited about the TLX Type S coming out, and then I was very unhappy with how that all turned out. So we're just kind of going to ignore that. But I think our very first car, still in the Acura line, has been recently teased, and I know literally nothing about it. But Jess, you seem to know a little bit about it. It's the Acura Integra.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been seeing a lot of different marketing ploys that Acura has been doing, kind of the revival of the Integra. I think it was actually at Car Week this year. They had a drone display showing, hey, the Integra's coming back. They did a flip lights kind of thing on the front, just teasing the old school Integra vibe, which is super cool. They've recently teased the new rear lights and some features.
Sure. But
nobody really knows anything about the actual vehicle. So I'm really excited to see what they do with it. I hope there is a lot of homage to the original. I think a lot of car manufacturers, we were actually talking about this earlier, they don't really do a good job with homage. They just do, hey, this is a new model that we're producing, and we're just going to name it something. We're
going to slap a nameplate on it.
It seems like someone in an office somewhere is like, hey, you can get 0.7% extra sales if you put this name on it.
I mean, we're looking at the Blazer specifically.
Cough, Mustang, Mach-E, cough.
Trailblazer.
Sure, but I mean, think about with the Mach-E, at least it's like that one I understand a little bit more than some of the other like vintage names that come out, because like the Mach-E brought enough unintentional press about like, is it a Mustang? Is it not a Mustang? Why would they use the Mustang name? Like, and that brought so many conversations about the Mustang Mach-E that we all know what the Mustang Mach-E is. and we have no doubt that it's an electric car that looks like an SUV.
Yeah, and any press is good press, right?
Sure,
There's no such
sure.
thing as bad press. It brought a ton of attention to a nameplate that, hopefully, I know that it's kind of the stigma right now with, companies coming in and saying, what Chevy say? There's not going to be a Camaro in a couple years.
Right.
So
Everything's going to something different. But I will say where Ford messed up with maybe the Mach-E, or maybe they didn't, they've really nailed the nameplate with the Bronco. That car, that SUV looks phenomenal. And I think it's really, except for the Bronco Sport.
we don't talk about sport.
No. The actual Bronco, the Sasquatch edition and like the 35-inch tires and all that, it looks fantastic. I mean, it looks awesome. And it's really taking it, I think, directly to the Jeep Wrangler, right? But I think also I will give it to Jeep. They've been doing a little bit more with some cool styling stuff, but like you were saying, the Grand Wagoneer, like, does it look like a Wagoneer? Not really. There's no wood panels.
Yeah, I've seen videos on them and some reviews, and it really just looks like their newest edition of a large luxury SUV. It's bulbous. It's kind of strange looking. They had such a cool platform, and there's a lot of collector interest on the original Wagoneers and Grand Wagoneers, and they had such a cool platform. Obviously, they don't need to do wood siding on the new version.
I would at least do one with like a sticker pack of like maybe... Oh, you could do like ghost wood panel, like the color would be like pearlescent white with like a slight ghost gray, or like
even a
with the
wrap.
gray,
like a wrap.
Yeah.
You could do like a matte, like vinyl sticker over it, so that the pearlescent white underneath is like matte pearlescent white and kind of a grain pattern like wood. Chrysler, you can send the check to. No, just kidding. Well, I know you can if you want to take that idea, but.
Yeah, but it just seems that a lot of these car manufacturers, they're really in their development team and in their branding, they're just, hey, here's extra market share to slap a name on a new model that we're producing.
So, Jess, what do we know about the 2023 Acura Integra?
Not much.
And that's been the Midwest Motoring Podcast.
Tune in next time. We are the experts.
Yeah, they've actually kept a lot of the leaks out. Not many people really know anything. They've been just periodically releasing images, which is pretty cool branding. And I'm a marketing nerd, so it's been a really interesting thing to see all this hype around this vehicle. The next image is released. Hey, there's this cool new thing that they showed. Oh, this is being shared everywhere. And I mean, it's all over social media whenever there's a new picture. So
the back end of it looks like a G35.
It does a little bit, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I've seen some pictures.
Or a Genesis Coupe.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, Genesis Coupe. But as this article from Car and Driver mentions, it looks like in some of the teaser trailers, it's going to come with a 6-speed manual.
Hey, another car coming with a 6-speed manual. The new 11th Gen Civic, or 11th, 12th Gen Civic Si.
We are experts on this podcast.
Let's just stick with 2021, 22, whatever.
22.
This is all 2022s and
Yeah,
2023. So the 2023 Honda Civic Si and Type R, that's kind of on the same list, and I'm guessing it just because of the Honda Acura lineage. I'm sure that the Integra is going to be sharing some backbone, frame, suspension characteristics of the Honda, and I don't like the look of the new Honda Civic Type R. I think when I think of a Type R being the biggest, most powerful, most race car-ish Civic, it needs to have big wings, it needs to be flamboyant, it needs to have scoops, and we're getting a much more grown-up version of the Type R with the new 2023 Civic Type R. But they're saying a little bit more horsepower, much more better handling, and it's probably going to sell a lot more because it is a lot more subdued, I think, in that boy racer.
Well, I think a lot of the issue there is we're used to seeing a wagon be the platform for the Type R, and they're using the sedan now as kind of
like the EK.
Yeah, and it's a lot different than the modern Type R we're used to, because for a while the performance Civics have been all based on that wagon platform. So I think that maybe they need to look at the styling a little bit differently with the sedan version, because it's harder to make it something like that look aggressive. You don't have as much play on the back end for a big wing or something that would not look stupid.
Sure.
So I don't know. I'm interested to see kind of the reception of it once people are driving it, getting behind the wheel. But yeah, that they all seem to be optioned, or at least including a manual. James actually had a statement about that earlier.
We'll get to that later.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
I totally get what Matt's saying, though. Like, I thought that the current gen Type R just absolutely nailed it.
Sure.
It's just such a fun-looking car. You see it driving on the street, you know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I saw, some of the early photos of the next one, and I was kind of like, it's okay. I'd rather have the current one, for sure.
I think it just mutes some of the fun angles. And again, that's the grown-up, right? And these cars aren't cheap. Like, the Type R is going to be pretty expensive. So it's, damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? You're going to have some people who want the cars to be a little bit less boy racer, so they're more grown-up. But then you're going to have people like me who's like, if I'm buying a fun car, your opinion be damned. I want the fun car because that's what I want. So, but I'm excited to see what those bring. Switching kind of gears away from performance, fun, affordable cars to a fun, large electric car / truck. We can actually say electric truck. So the Ford F-150 Lightning. I'm pretty excited about that. I currently have a 2021 Ford F-150. I really like it. I think it's done a really good job of modernizing the F-150. Obviously, a lot of the tech in it are far and away beyond most F-150s and what they used to have. But Ford has released probably the first obtainable electric truck, because there's the Cybertruck out there that we don't know when that's coming out. And then there is the GMC Humvee EV vehicle, which that's starting, I think, at $105,000 or something like that. Very expensive. But I mean, the performance is there too. But this is going to be an affordable, everyday EV pickup truck, and I think that's going to be pretty cool, because I think that it's probably going to be the best-selling EV vehicle out there.
Yeah, they're going to be competing really aggressively with some of like the Tesla people. And I think, especially in places like Texas and even California, where people love trucks, it's going to be a really huge seller, and they're doing a lot of cool things with it. Like you could probably live in the frunk, like just about it. That thing is huge. And then you can even power your house with it and all sorts of cool stuff like that. So I think really Ford really hit the nail on the head with that one. And especially the price tag. What was it? It's going to be under $30,000.
Starting at $38,000.
Okay, so it's a little higher than I thought, but yeah, still for a truck like that,
yeah,
full size truck. I mean, you're hard pressed to find something under 40 anyway.
Yeah.
So with an electric version, I think what we're kind of all skeptical on is obviously torque. That's not a problem. There's going to be tons of towing capabilities with an electric vehicle, immediate power, torque. That's what they excel at, but at the trade-off of battery and duration and how long you can go with the range. That's kind of the one thing with trucks where it's like they're not aerodynamic like other EV vehicles that we've seen so far, that are all they do is they're built to negate some of those range issues with their design.
You'd be surprised how aerodynamic most of these trucks are nowadays. Like old F-150s and old, Dodges were, yes, very non-fuel efficient and not aerodynamic, but with most of this designs and things like that, and CAD designs and wind tunnel testing, these cars and trucks have pretty low drag coefficients. But you were mentioning towing capacity, and you're going to lose a little bit because of the battery weight. So a lot of people don't think about what gross vehicle weight does to your payload, like what payload does to your towing. Is like you have to take everything into consideration. So if you've got like 6 big people in that truck, well, 5 because it can hold 5, plus the one in the frunk, is like if you have all these people in it, that takes away from your payload, which also takes away from your towing. But they say that towing is going to be rated at about 10,000 pounds,
which is plenty,
which isn't bad. I mean, granted, my non-electric F-150 can pull 12,000 pounds, and it's hybrid.
But honestly, there's very few people that are towing that kind of weight with the smallest form factor full size truck.
Yeah, and I think that the key thing to think about here, and when this thing first came out, I I saw people online just commenting like, well, I drive 400 miles every day and tow 20,000 pounds. It's like, okay, well, this might not be the truck for you.
Yeah.
But for
Me?
a large segment of the population that's buying these trucks, it's going to be perfect.
I mean, thinking about it, it's like I'm looking at this truck going, I drive probably less than 400 miles on that truck on average. Now, there are times that I do make long distance trips to like Cincinnati and back, which could eclipse and get very close to 400 miles. But it's like, that's few and far between. But I am curious, like you said, Jess, is like what happens when you do put 10,000 pounds on that tongue? What's that going to do to your distance? Obviously, that's going to cut it down. That's what happens when you have something pulling. But the nice thing is, like you mentioned, EVs have lots of power. The extended range model on this thing, so the standard one's going to have about 426 horsepower. The extended range, 563 horsepower. That is now the most powerful Ford-produced F-150, period. End. Also, a blistering 775 foot-pounds of torque.
Is that all?
That's all.
That's it.
That's it.
Wow.
That's
not even in the 800s.
That's more powerful than the Raptor. That's more powerful than my truck. I think you're really going to have to get into like some of the aftermarket, like Super Snakes and like TRX,
or even diesels. Like
even
that's into diesel
yeah.
territory. I mean, I don't know what diesels are at now, but a couple of years ago they were in that 700 to 800 foot-pounds of torque area.
Yeah, the
so,
dualies and
The one problem with diesels, they don't accelerate fast. Like it's just because they run through the RPMs real quick, and then they got to shift, and then they got to shift again, and then shift again, right? I mean, this truck they're saying fully loaded, it's going to do 0 to 60 in like under 5 seconds. Like that's insane.
That's very fast
for a pickup.
For a pickup, full size pickup truck. But yeah, so I'm excited about that one. I want to see what that one's going to do. The next one on this list, Jess, you just told me a little bit about this one. It's the Porsche Cayman Gt4 RS.
Yeah, so the Porsche Cayman GT4 for the iterations that they've made in modern history has been one of the best track cars out there. And the fact that we're finally getting an RS variant of the Cayman platform is awesome. It being kind of a smaller version of the 911, people have been waiting for more of a track-equipped Cayman. I know there are definitely people that, 911 is going to be the best car on the track. Yes, it's way faster, but for something more nimble that's going to be, it has a lot shorter wheelbase, and
right.
it just seems like the logical next step for Porsche and the Cayman to have a even more aggressive version of that vehicle. So I'm super excited for that. Obviously with the new GT3 coming out, and soon after probably a new 911 GT3 RS, having the option for both is just awesome. Different kind of cars altogether, how they function and their weight distribution and stuff. So for track enthusiasts, it's a big win.
I think finally Porsche has learned their lesson of not neutering their models within the brand to not eclipse the 911. And that's not like, I think what they finally realized is they just need to push the 911 harder versus having the 911 being the top and them neutering everything below it, right? Because like the Cayman and the Boxster, they're just really, really well-balanced vehicles that can pull some pretty crazy lap times. And if they had the same power plant, which a lot of guys transplant a 3-liter flat 6 into them, like they're missiles.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. The thing they've been so hesitant on is having a top-end Cayman be more expensive and a higher cost or a higher quality vehicle, or just in their line above a base 911.
Sure.
And they've always been hesitant of that. But I think that they're starting to finally realize that there's a huge market for it. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of people that are weekend warriors going out to the track, and that's exactly what they want.
I mean, just look at the GT4 non-RSs that aren't currently available, but like the standard GT4 Caymans are extremely popular and are selling for, a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people have realized that the GT4 is one of the best track cars you can possibly get, especially cost to performance ratio. I mean, there's just a lot of things going for the GT4 already. And add RS, add more aero, add more power.
Add less weight.
Exactly.
Well,
I mean,
did you see the ring times they announced?
no.
So I'm reading this article here. It says lap around the ring 7:09:30.
Oh,
That is 23.6 seconds faster than the non-RS model.
so the standard GT4.
That is
23
a
seconds.
lot of time.
Yeah, especially on the Nürburgring.
That is very fast.
So they're saying the 4-liter engine from the GT4 will be continued. However, it'll produce about 414 brake horsepower and about 310 foot-pounds of torque. So it's gonna be a little missile for sure. And the one downside to all of these Porsche brand models is that somebody's gonna buy the GT4 and then the RS is gonna come out and they're gonna be like, why? And then they'll just trade it in and get the RS. But for a hot minute, they'll be a little upset. Next on the list, this one's kind of a question mark, and I put it here because I don't know too much about it. Hyundai has been teasing for the last, year and a half, a mid-engine car. It's currently being kind of tossed around as their prototype called the R20. It's a mid-engine car that kind of looks like the Veloster. But this brings me back to Renault Clio Sport V6 mid-engine, hot hatch, just craziness. So I'm excited to learn more about it. Obviously, there's not much information out there currently, but they're saying 2023, and it's supposed to have an N-Line package, which the N-Line is their Nürburgring package.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen such success in the Veloster N and even just the Veloster as a whole vehicle. I mean, there's a lot of people that are really passionate about that hot hatch segment. I mean, you see the Golf R, the A3, RS3. Obviously, that's not an entirely hatch in the U.S., but you're seeing all these hot hatches, especially overseas in Europe, but in the U.S. starting to be a huge segment for people that love going to autocross and love doing these weekend activities that they want a practical car that doesn't break the bank, but they also are getting this awesome performance vehicle.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's a segment in the industry that gets more just general enthusiasts excited than hot hatches. I mean, you could make the argument for certain things, but I think exactly what you just said. Utility, cost, performance, all of that wrapped up into a nice, cute little bow. It's the perfect package, and I think a lot of people get excited about them.
Yeah, I know that mid-engine is kind of something fun being thrown around right now, and I know Toyota is even looking at bringing back their midship vehicle, the MR2, back. However, they were looking, in the last article I read on that was saying that it might be electrified, so I don't know how you have a mid-engine electric vehicle other than putting the
batteries
only
in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Could you even call that mid-motor?
Mid-motor, not mid-engine?
Mid-batteried?
Well, typically, wouldn't it go to the wheels?
Two-seater rear-wheel drive electric vehicle. But, who knows? They haven't released anything in that, but again, that Hyundai, I saw that on a couple articles, and I was like, that seems really cool. We'll see how that plays out for them. The next one we talked about a little bit before on the podcast, but that's the Nissan Z, the 2023 Nissan Z, coming back stronger than ever. 400 horsepower twin-turbo V6 with a manual.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely excited for that vehicle. I think that's another brand that as we were mentioning, they did homage well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of cues from the history, which is super cool, and that's kind of why they're just calling it the Z. They're not even mentioning it with a number. A lot of people, it was pre-production, named the 400Z, but they decided to just go with the Nissan Z, which I think it ties in and incorporates a lot of the good things that we loved about all the generations of the Z cars.
It's also kind of like a refresh, it's kind of like taking an existing story and finalizing all of the storylines. Right? We see this in comic books. We see this in television. We see this in movies where it's like, and we're starting again. This is the beginning of the next Nissan Z, right? And so maybe the next one will be like the Nissan 500Z, right? But it's like this is going back to square one, it seems like. But I'm super excited about that. It looks amazing. Like you said, James, what do you think of this?
No, and I think we were talking on the last episode we talked about this. We were talking about the price. And I believe they announced it. there's still, I think, a little bit of speculation, but there's rumors that it's going to be between that $35,000 and $40,000 price tag, which is just perfect because it's about $10,000 cheaper than the Supra. So I'm super excited for this. I've always loved the Z cars. I've always loved what Nissan does, and I think it's a beautiful car. And if you could steal one for $35,000 with 400 horsepower, do it.
Yeah, I think the latest info that I've seen from like Car and Driver and Motor Trend and Kelley Blue Book is saying right around 40,000. But I mean, that's probably just best guess scenario.
Yeah, and I mean, that could be with equipment, with options. I mean, there's two different models coming out. There's the performance and the, or whatever, the sport version and the standard. And yeah, I mean, even at 40, that seems to be a pretty good bargain for what you're getting. I don't think people are going to complain too much about that price tag when some of its counterparts and some of its competitors are maybe even 5,000 to 10,000 more at least. So,
and I think I put it as last on this list, mostly because I created the list. It's my podcast. I'll do what I want. But I digress. It's the 2023 Corvette C806. A lot of people recently have been, they kind of leaked some images of the vehicle. I think they've recently announced like what the car will look like. But and some people are not too thrilled by the updated styling of the C8. I don't care. I think the C8 looked fantastic. I think with every Z06 that has come, it's been an iteration of that generation. No Z06 really looks outlandishly different than the base Corvette that it's based on, right? So I think there has to be some carryover of like they're using the same shell, they're using the same style, and they're just kind of turning it up from like 5 to like 8 out of 10.
And turning it up, they are with a flat plane cranked V8, similar to what we saw with the GT350
and most Ferraris,
and a lot of those higher performance vehicles. And the rumors are that this one's going to rev to 8,600 RPM.
They have confirmed that based on a recent video released by Chevy, where in one of the images they had like cut back and forth between dash pictures, and in third gear they were doing 100 miles an hour at 8,600 RPM.
Can you imagine what that thing sounds like?
There are like
in
teaser
person,
videos.
in person,
oh, okay.
Like in person. Videos or whatever. But like, can you imagine hearing that thing drive down Riverside here in front of our lovely office?
I can't wait.
I
can't wait. I'm going to show my wife this video, and hopefully we're going to sell a child or so and try to afford
we have two
one
now.
of these.
Yeah, you do have a second.
We have extras now, so we're going to see if we can sell one and make some money off. No, I'm just kidding. I love James and I love Owen, but I
love you too.
I am super interested in this car. Just because I think the other problem with the C8 was that it was very, yes, I'm well aware, is that I don't think the C8 handled all that well. And I think, like we were just talking about with the Porsches, I think they did it on purpose. I think they made the standard C8 kind of pedestrian, understeer a lot. And because the reason I think that is because some guys were then putting track-focused alignments on the cars, and they were pulling really good times after that, right? So it's like there is, I think, more that car can give that GM is holding back for the Z06, potentially for the Zora later on. But I think this, or maybe if they do a Grand Sport of this, will be the two best Corvettes out there. And like you said, a flat plane crank V8 producing, how much horsepower did they say? James, do you know?
I think I saw about 600, something in that ballpark. I mean, it's
I saw, I think, almost 7 maybe even. People are speculating. But, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It could be some of they tried to put a little bit of a cap on what the standard C8's about able to do. But it's also their first modern iteration of a mid-engine Corvette. There might be some growing pains with that. And maybe the Z06 is the solution. Maybe they've figured out some more of the things they can do to make it more track-focused. Since it is kind of new, it's a new realm for them. So
I'm curious as to what the actual horsepower figures will be. But, yeah, like you said, James, I think they're thinking north of 600. even if it was 595 or something around 500 plus horsepower, I think that car is just going to handle well. It's going to put its power down. Unfortunately, I think it's an 8-speed dual clutch only.
So no manual option.
No manual option, which some people will think is a bummer. And I think some people will be a little offended by that. And that kind of brings us to our next topic, James, who boldly asserted today
that manual transmissions are overrated.
I can't understand that. You have to explain.
So here's the thing. I have in my garage a 2004 Mustang GT that has a 5-speed transmission. It is a blast to drive. I absolutely love driving manual transmission vehicles. I believe if you are looking at a purely performance perspective, that there's nothing that's going to beat a dual clutch automatic transmission. It's going to shift faster. It's going to shift better. Those computers are way smarter than you and me.
See, I definitely agree with you there, James, about the performance, about the manual not being as good as a dual clutch. But the thing that I always kind of, the counter argument to that I've always heard is the amount of people that's actually going to affect in a daily situation isn't enough to make that matter. For a performance vehicle like the Z06 that actually might see a lot of track time, it does make sense. But for normal cars where it's enthusiasts just driving it because they enjoy the car, I think that the experience of pulling gear, I mean, you're pulling the shifter, that's you're way more in tune with the vehicle. And I think that's where manual really shines, is going to be just the experience of it. Not everyone's out there needing tenths of seconds based on the shift times.
Well, why not? Get out there and do that.
I get that, but at the same time, there's definitely a place for manuals. I think if you're sheerly looking for raw performance, absolutely, they're not as quick. You're not going to get something that can do the same things as a dual clutch can. I think that's why Porsche, for all of their high end enthusiast track focused vehicles, are on dual clutch platforms. I think that them offering kind of the option for manual is more for hey, I'm an enthusiast. I like going to the track on weekends, but I'm not a professional driver. I'm not just all about my time.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other reasons why they're starting to you're not starting to see less of those in showrooms. I mean, it's beyond just the performance, and I'm not here for this part of it, but part of the reason why we don't see as many of them is emissions laws and stuff like that. They can't guarantee that a car is going to pass emissions with someone driving a manual transmission vehicle. That's why a lot of them are slower. They're geared differently. And frankly, it's a decision that a lot of automakers have made to protect the bottom line.
I think Jason Camisa of Haggerty did an article or / a video on YouTube about how the manual is lying to you, right? And how it's geared to be slower nowadays than the automatic.
Yeah, and that's part of where I'm getting some of this from, and it's absolutely true. I mean, they just can't compete with modern automatic transmissions. I mean, 30 years ago, it's a different story.
I think a lot of it also comes from manufacturers not wanting to spend as much money in development and making multiple transmissions. You just don't see a split as 50-50 as you would have maybe 20 years ago, where it's a lot of people still wanted the manual transmission. Now it's really only enthusiasts that are looking for manual transmissions in vehicles. So it's just not cost effective to make both.
Yeah, there's definitely less of a demand for it. I think you're absolutely right about that. And even in that research and development piece, I mean, if they're going to have an automatic and a manual, they need to make a certain number of each car just to destroy. And it's a huge cost thing. So
yeah, but a lot of that cost is split amongst different brands, different marquees within the brand, as well as outside of the brand. And this has to do with automatics and manuals all together. For example, Ford and GM went together on the 10-speed automatic, that's in my pickup truck, right? They're using it a little bit differently in one version or the other. Same thing with the dual clutch, right? That's in the GT500 and in the Corvette that we're talking about. Same exact transmission with either, I think the Ford Mustang GT500 has 10 gears.
I think you're right.
Or maybe it's, no, I think it might have 8. And then the Corvette C8 has 7 gears. But whatever, like, they co-developed that transmission, obviously with some quirks to it, but like companies are sharing the ability and the cost on these transmissions, and other companies are making them. Like, I forget who made it, but it's like Timken used to make a ton of stuff. Tremec makes a bunch of stuff. Yeah, so, and those are available to just about any brand or manufacturer who's willing to, develop and, kind of share some of that cost. I don't know if you guys talked about this, but yeah, lap times. Did you guys go in?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on the fact that, like, not everyone's out there chasing tenths of seconds.
Which they should be.
That was his point, was everyone should be out there racing their car.
100%.
But what it boils down to is it's just not feasible for everyone, and sometimes they just want to be connected with their car more and enjoy the nostalgia or the experience of shifting gears.
And Jess, you and I were talking about this pre-show, and I think another part of it is also those who are able to afford like these cars, like these Z06s, the Porsches and things like that, and the ones who have the time and means to go to a track day or a race, right? They're quite wealthy, and generally speaking, the wealthy are older individuals, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is also a diminishing return on, I think, when like you're young and able to shift gears and really rode through the gears too. And this is a generalization. I know I'm going to have a bunch of people reach out and be like, I'm 80 years old and I still roll the gears. It's like, if you're 80, you're never going to go through the manual and like have 3 pedals and be as fast as a contemporary with 2 pedals and like a PDK or a dual clutch. It's just, you're having so much more to think about. You're having so much more to do. And sure, maybe that's more fun. I'm not like arguing that fact, but I will say is that it's easier for people with larger pocketbooks and up there in age to maybe drive these automatics. And that's also going to be the death, I think, of the manual.
Well, to be completely honest, even if you're not up in age and you're driving the same manual and you're rowing through the gears, you're hard-pressed to even beat the time anyway. So it almost is it's a moot point where it's, sure, they might not be as fast on the gears, but, like, it doesn't even matter. Like, you can't beat the PDK or the dual clutch anyway. There's very few people that are talented enough drivers to get to that point.
And automatics are actually, I think, more expensive than the manual counterparts, because look at our list that we talked about, the future cars that we're excited for. The ones that we had at the top of the list, not in any particular order, but just that we mentioned first, was the Acura Integra and the Honda Civic Si, both of which are broadcasting that they will be coming with a 6-speed manual transmission. Those cars are aimed at a younger, less affluent market. Sure, I mean, there will be outliers. I'm not saying that the only people who are going to buy those cars are going to be younger, but like, just like we're talking about with the Civic Type R, is like that car is designed for somebody who has a certain energy about them, and it's affordable to them, right? Then we start looking at the Cayman Gt4 Rs. Do we know what that's going to have?
I can almost guarantee you it is not going to be a manual.
Or it's going to have an option.
Yeah, like the GT3 where they have the touring.
Sure.
And you can put a manual in it, but
they're going to make 7 of those cars.
Exactly. It's going to be for the person that's like, hey, I got the manual version, and it's for a collector that's not taking it to the track. For people that are wanting it for what its intention is, are going to go with the other option.
The Nissan Z. They broadcasted that they are going to be sending it with a manual, 6-speed manual. A automatic is available as well, but it's being shipped with a 6-speed and an optional automatic. But that car, again, like we talked about, it's going to be $40,000. Again, affordable to a youthful, younger generation of car fans, right? Whereas a Z06, that's an $80,000+ car. If you look at if you look at any of the 911s, over $80,000 base, right?
Mm-hmm. But I do, you have to recognize, though, especially with, as you're saying, these maybe geared towards a younger audience, you have to love that they're still trying to keep the manual transmission alive. there are still
begrudgingly
people,
sometimes, but yeah, they do.
Exactly. They might be dragging their feet through the mud with it, and it might cost actually a premium to buy a manual at this point, which is completely backwards from what it used to be. But there are still people interested in driving manuals, which it's cool. I mean, I just recently learned to drive a manual, actually, and I should have learned many years ago, and I've always wanted to learn, just didn't really have the opportunity to. They don't come by as often, and it's a blast, and it's one of those things where there's people that are interested in it, and these new cars coming out with that option, it's cool to see because they're really getting it in front of people and making it available.
I met a 16-year-old last night at a Porsche Club event. He drove in a 2001 Acura Integra, 6-speed or a 5-speed manual, and like he kept looking around, and I kept like staring at him. And finally, I walked over. I was like, "Hey, man, I'm not staring at you because you don't belong. I'm staring at you because that's one heck of a car, right?" It was a beautiful white Integra, and they had just put an exhaust on it. It sounded great, but like. That's great to see that people want to be driving manuals. And he's like, yeah, I wanted to have my first car be a manual. I didn't want to have an automatic and try to learn later. I was like, dude, that's awesome. Rock on, right? Now, granted, his dad also had a 996 Turbo, which was like also awesome. But, you know, the enthusiasts out there will want the manuals. They are fun to drive. A manual transmission is, I think, more engaging to operate as a car lover because you are making the decision of what gear to be in. I think it's also more predictable on a track when you're like, all right, I need to be in this gear for this turn. You're not trying to shift gears mid-turn. But with some of these future dual clutches and, wild automatic transmissions, you're not even going to notice that it shifted mid-turn.
Well, the crazy thing is a lot of these new dual clutches, not only if you miss a shift, are they just going to do it for you?
Yeah.
Just as well. That's the big thing. It's like they're almost idiot proof for the weekend warrior that wants to go out to the track for the first time. You go out, and if you got a lot of money and you got a Porsche, you can go out and relatively easily beat a track down and have a pretty decent lap time because the car's doing a lot of the work for you.
Jess, final thoughts, man, on our manual transmissions overrated. What do you think?
I think it really depends on the person and what you're looking for.
Well, what do you think?
I don't think they're overrated. I think that they are properly rated.
Properly rated. All right, James, what do you think, man?
No, I definitely think you guys make some good points. I think if you're just looking for a car to take out on the weekends, go cruising in the country, something like that, perfect. You want a manual transmission. But if you're daily driving a car, and there's those people out there that like that, it's just not for me. I like them, but it's kind of an inconvenience if you're just talking about your commuter car.
I see what you're saying on that, and I had a 04 GTO that had a clutch that I think was like 50 pounds, and so like that was a pain in the butt to do like stop and go traffic in, and I really think my left knee
you needed a workout, honestly.
God,
yeah, you gotta have a Popeye leg.
My left leg was a Popeye leg for sure, man, on that car, and so that made me want an automatic. And then after I sold that car, I was like, why did I sell that car? I wish I wouldn't have sold it because I missed the manual, right? I think it's a very interesting conversation when it comes to a dynamic enthusiast level car that is fun to drive. It's fast, but it's not blistering fast. A manual is the way to go. Like, I'm thinking Miatas. I'm thinking Honda Civics. I mean, even the S2000. The Type R, I know it's got 300 horsepower plus, but like that level of car, I think right around the 300 horsepower mark, manual transmission's great. You don't need anything else. When you start looking at 700 horsepower, 800 horsepower, 900 horsepower in some of these massive cars, or even like the
5.6 in a Porsche or whatever it might be.
Well, I mean, that's a very lightweight car, but like any of those cars that are super powerful for its frame and chassis, I think a automatic might be the way to go. And I, like, as much as I begrudgingly say that, it's like because it's gives you less things to think about when you're going that fast, right? All you got to worry about is going and stopping. Well, guys, I think that has been our episode of the Midwest Motoring Podcast. I am so happy that James and Jess could join us today. But leave us a comment. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it. But we can't wait to continue doing this and talking about cars, and whether it be digitally, whether it be audio, whether it be video. We're going to try a couple of new things, I think, in here in the future. So, Jess, is there some place that you want people to go check you out at?
No, I mean
OnlyFans?
No, not in the OnlyFans. I stream on Twitch occasionally. Jess Myers 5, Instagram Jess Myers 5. I don't post very often, but I like cars, and I occasionally will post a couple.
James, what about you? You got an Instagram handle you want people to go follow you at?
I'd have to look it up. I don't actually have it memorized. But please, feel free. Tell me how wrong I am about manual transmissions in the comments. For sure.
Definitely let him know. And you can find me at Sir Pesiconis on Instagram. But this has been the Midwest Motoring Podcast, and I can't wait for you guys to join us on the next one. We'll see you guys real soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.